Hello and welcome to another episode of Literary Gladiators, the show where we discuss and debate literature in all of its forms. If it's written work, it's game. Let's meet the panel.
Hi, I'm Nicole.
I'm Kelsey.
I'm Lily.
And I'm Josh. Lily, how does it feel sitting at this end of the panel?
Oh, it's something new.
Sitting where Charlie...
Get a fresh perspective. I know this is Charlie's seat.
Do you get hungry when you sit in the seat?
I don't. That's
You
all
want a
him.
cookie?
Okay.
I don't get his wonderful Groucho Marx-esque sense of humor either.
At least you keep your personal charm and who you are, because Literary Gladiators...
I like that charm.
Literary
Yeah, I like the way you
Gladiators
That's
said
what we're
that.
gonna stick there.
is all about individuals.
It's like when you call someone unique.
You're like, you're special.
I heard that
Charming, Lily.
a lot.
What are we going over today?
Well,
Today-
I've certainly heard that one before. And I don't even have to press E. Subtle League of Legends joke is subtle.
And no, it is not. The Fault in Our Stars by John Green is what we would be discussing today.
Okay. Happiness, we've got that right now.
Hi.
Returning to something a bit more bleak, but at the same time...
Popular.
It's popular, and it takes such a serious issue with a sense of lighthearted cheer.
Depending on what part of the book you're at.
Yeah. Of course, it's about people, teenagers who are dealing with cancer, and it could be bleak throughout, but there are parts that are going to be inevitably bleak, but at the same time, there are moments that just make you feel warm and fuzzy inside.
Well, it's bleak if you let it be. That's the whole thing.
I mean,
Yeah, like even just the sentence, it's teenagers dealing with cancer, like it's a book about life, and that's just a part of theirs. I don't like to look at it like the central issue of the book.
Okay. What is our first question, anyway?
Panel, do you feel this novel is accurate in capturing the experiences of those who battle cancer?
I don't feel that I can accurately speak on that, being that it's not a battle I encounter. I've read books that take a lot of stances on it. I've read reviews from a lot of cancer patients who have read it, but I think it's just such an intimate issue that every individual handles differently, and you'd probably find a lot of people that think, yeah, this is accurate, this is what my treatments were like, this is what, my encounters with my family were like, and then you could find someone who feels the total opposite. So I don't know if it's accurate in the broad spectrum of all cancer patients, but I'm sure there are those who relate very, very closely to it.
Specifically Esther Earle, who was a heavy influence in the book because John Green had a close relationship with her and was able to really bring Hazel's voice to life because of his relationship with her. So.
A girlfriend relationship or a friend relationship?
Oh, no,
Esther
no.
Earle is to whom the book is dedicated.
Yeah,
She was a 16-year-old cancer patient that John Green became close with.
Oh, okay. But I absolutely agree with what you have to say, and I want to take the time to shout out to a coworker and very dear friend of mine. Her name is Kayla. She had brain cancer and has been cancer-free for the last 13 years. And she read the book, and she felt that it was very accurate. And I will take her word for it, to the fact that this is the way that people deal with this kind of terrible illness.
I think there are such subtle pieces of the book. Like, I love the book as a whole personally, but I think there are certain just like blips too that sometimes get lost in the reading of it. And one part of it where she says, they say lack of appetite is a side effect of cancer, and she says it's a side effect of dying.
Yeah.
And I think that like little things like that kind of show you like how they might look at it versus how you might, as a non-cancer patient, view a certain circumstance.
At the same time, they don't let this interfere with their greatest dreams that they may have. The fact that Hazel continues to dream of meeting her favorite author and going to the Netherlands to try and pry the ending out of him. Perhaps it was a bit because she is dealing with terminal illness.
It gives her that sense of why not.
It puts her on the clock. It makes her.
It's like, I can do this, I'm dying.
Yeah, it makes
I
her.
should do this, I'm
Yeah.
dying.
But.
For surviving, she is alive at the end of the book, so we don't really know where her future is headed. So, while she may view it as her dying, it might not, like, eventually it'll end in that in the grand scheme of things for all of us, but I mean, her death could be, further away than she considers.
Yeah, it could be the next page of the novel after it ends. It could be another 2 books.
Originally, they were going to have Isaac be the narrator.
Oh, I love him. That would
But
be great.
they decided to make Hazel the narrator instead. I think that, in a way, it worked to tell it from her perspective, because I don't know how much Isaac would have had to have been
With them on their journey.
Yeah, a foreseeing narrator, that not only with them on the journey, but he would have had to bring into perspective everything that happened, even if he was not there.
Or it just would have been a different novel entirely. It would have been his instead of hers. So.
Yes, it would.
Yeah, I find it interesting to have changed the narrative perspective and try to keep it Hazel's story, because it would, you really, you have the question that asks if it accurately depicts cancer, but part of that is kind of seeing the first person, and Isaac as well was suffering from cancer, but his circumstance, like I said, there's such intimate issues. His view of Hazel's predicament could have been wildly inaccurate.
Right.
So hearing that from the first person, I feel like was super necessary to transcend that barrier with the audience.
It's interesting to hear that there was almost another narrator, because that's something of a meta commentary on terminal illness, isn't it? Because doesn't everybody end up speaking for the patient and saying, like, this is what this person would want or whatever?
I love that. I was really upset that they cut this out of the movie, personally. But that, brings a really good point to when Hazel discovers Augustus's ex-girlfriend who died of, the brain tumor, and she's going through her Facebook page and saying, oh, we miss you, we this, we that, and then she talks to Augustus, and he's like, she kind of was just a bitch. Like, she became evil, and she became this, and it just shows you, like you said, when people start speaking for the patient, what a different story you
Right.
get altogether, and it's, it's his mind and what really happened.
Yeah, that I would say that, especially when, for some reason, they don't, especially if someone portrays them as being a fighter, but in actuality they really didn't take care of themselves.
Mhm.
Trying to assume that every cancer patient is the same.
Mhm.
Right.
In actuality,
Right.
it's not.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
I agree.
Next question.
Why do you feel this novel appeals so well to its target generation, if you do feel that way?
Personally, I feel that it appeals to, I feel like it targets my generation, and I feel like it appeals to us so greatly because I feel cancer is becoming a thing that touches everybody's lives. We all, most people know somebody with cancer, had somebody in their family that had cancer and either survived it or didn't survive it, so I feel it largely appeals to us because, we all have been touched by the issue in some way.
I agree with what you have to say, but I also, on the other end, I think that the way that he writes, I think that the way that his language, Hazel is very relatable to.
She's accessible.
She's very accessible to the people of today's generation, and Augustus is that. I would say that Augustus is, or Gus is the quintessential boyfriend that
Young girls his
young,
days are
younger,
after.
young girls want to have. He is a testament of what a girl is looking for, a man that is willing to take leaps and bounds in order to do everything he can in order to make the girl that he loves as happy as she can possibly
Well, I
be.
think that's true for the younger generation, but I think, and that's why it's young adult and it appeals to, like, you know, those who are earlier in their youth. But I feel, you know, that it applies to people that are older as well for an entirely different reason. Because women that are older don't necessarily need a man who does that, like that quintessential man. We're not all looking for that cookie cutter idea.
I don't think it's
So-
about the cookie cutterness of the potential boyfriend. I think it's
more
in,
about
in
values.
every. It's not even about values for me. It's the fact that even sitting here as a 22-year-old about to get married in a month and a half, I can bring myself back to 16 and I can see myself falling in love with my 16-year-old boyfriend, and I can hear those words and I can feel that smile and I can feel the breath leave my body the way it leaves Hazel's when she thinks about him. And I think just being able to, even if it doesn't appeal now, to be able to kind of bring about those senses, which is at least what it did for me. You know, I read it in a very intimate way. I've read it a couple times, and for me, it's just so innocent for young people who are dealing with so much. You know, like they've got so much on their plate. Hazel's in college. They're dying of cancer, and all of this is happening around them, and they're, you know, facing all these challenges. And then you've got very advanced poetry in the middle of the novel that you wouldn't think a 16-year-old is reading, but in the midst of all of that, you still have kind of this innocence about young love, and that I feel like is something that is relatable for people of all ages, that this is how young love is.
That fascination with American literature was quite impressive. The references that she made.
Well, I think it also shows that, you know, we are starting to recognize that teenagers are capable of more and that we shouldn't doubt them so heavily.
Mm-hmm.
And you have time to read when you're dying.
Or when you're living with cancer. You know, she's not just dying with, she's
Yeah.
not dying of cancer, she's living with it. Like it's,
The only reason I reference it as dying, because I know you keep correcting and saying living with, is because that's how she's viewing it.
Yeah.
The entire novel. She's
Yeah.
dying, she's dying.
Because
she's
life
dying.
is a
Kind
death is a
of
part of
like,
life
It's,
in
yeah,
itself,
it's a part
you
of
know.
it, and she's
Depends on how you look at the
understanding it.
glass.
yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's something that, you know, she says when she's explaining it to Gus, you know, he says like, oh, the blank square work, blah, blah, blah. She's like, yeah, theoretically I could live like this for a while. Like, she recognizes that, you know, it's not tomorrow, but, you know, it's so much of her perspective on her short life consumes the novel. Her relationship with her mother, her relationship with Augustus, her pushing him away. You know, she feels she's dying and that there's nothing she can do to stop it, that there's no predicting it could be today or tomorrow. And I feel like cancer or not, love or not, you know, college or not, you know, she's going about her day, she's going about her life, but no matter how much she's, you know, giving to the world, she can't help but feel like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that's always in the back of her mind. It's at every decision, it's at every turn.
But although she constantly references it as she's dying of cancer, it's, you know, the people around her constantly making that correction that she's living with cancer that, you know, gives her that kind of spring in her step. Like, you know, while she does reject it in the beginning of the novel, by the end she's kind of come around to the idea that she is living.
But
with
is
it.
that from the non-cancer motivation or from her encounter with Augustus that motivates her to live more fulfilled?
It definitely helps that she
Because
came across
I
Augustus.
viewed her, you know, when she was receiving, you know, her mom with the pushes and the yes and the go Hazel and blah, 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 you know, rejecting all of it until Augustus came into the picture because he was accessible for her, the same as she might be accessible.
Her mother was just a little bit too pushy, and her father was just he was just emotional throughout the whole thing. He was in the background.
Mhm.
So I think that with Augustus, provided that he was a peer, he was not an overdrive of motivation, but he was just the right amount.
He motivated her without trying. Like her
Mhm.
parents who, and this I found very interesting, her parents who were constantly the pushers and the doers and the go, go, go. As soon as Augustus came into her life and Hazel was going on trips and walking to the park, they immediately put on the brakes and were like, you know, she's sick. You got to be careful. So it's very interesting to see, you know, they wanted her to excel and not to think
Dare
of it
her
that way.
drive, it's okay.
Exactly, but the minute something came into her life that made her feel that she could go on and she could, live life to the fullest while she had it, they were very hesitant to it. And it just kind of shows the contrast with, the intention being good, but still having that underlying fear for their circumstance.
I also think it has a lot to do with why it's so accessible and like why it's so
to young
popular
adults.
is because, it shows not only the view from the patient themselves, but also from the parents and how they do switch from point of view because they are in constant fear just as much as she is.
Yes,
So.
and as much as that's a cancer patient problem, you could say, isn't that every teenager's parents, in a sense?
Yeah, I was gonna say always shutting down, wanting them to have that life, like that spark, but when it comes from something other than them, they're always like at a little bit of arm's length.
Yeah, it's always a bit of a shock, and it's interesting to watch them deal with what Hazel's opinion is of her life ending, and them watching what is their baby girl who life is just beginning. Like she's just a teenager becoming a woman to them, but to her, it's a different point of view. So it's very interesting to watch all of those different opinions and how they interact with all the ongoings.
And I like you get each parent sort of showing an extreme lens on. You have the cancer patient and then the people that are at the periphery, right?
Mhm.
And then it's like you get the urge to throw up your hands on one end. Or
What kind of significance do you feel the title has? Is there any connection between The Fault in Our Stars and Shakespeare's Julius Caesar?
Okay, so I gotta get this out of my mind before I forget. So, as we know, John Green, the author, has a vlog, a video log, and
Crash course.
right. And when I had read the title and made the connection to Shakespeare, because there absolutely is one, I read it. The quote for Shakespeare is, "The fault is not in ourselves, but in our stars." So
that we are underlings.
That we are under, yeah. So I thought, okay, well, this title makes sense. Oh, the fault is not in ourselves; it's in the stars. And I thought, wow, maybe he's being contradictory, saying like, the fault is in ourselves. Like this is cancer; it's literally themselves killing, their body killing itself from the inside
the
out.
line is
So that's
it's
how I
in
thought.
ourselves.
Yeah, but it.
Yeah.
So I thought that
Yeah.
way, and then I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. Like, oh, that was punny. Good. And then I watched the video log, and it's supposedly from the author's perspective means the exact opposite, where they said it's absolutely in our stars. There are things you can't control. This is not something that these kids could control. Blah blah blah. So I found it very interesting that it could be, viewed both ways, unknowingly.
Mhm.
And then you could throw a third wrench into it and say, what's Cassius saying to Brutus? What are they talking about when he says that? Brutus says to him,
Shakespeare pop quizzes.
Brutus says to him, it's wrong for them to overthrow Caesar
Yes.
because God ordained that he's
Okay,
king.
yeah. So then it brings in the God figure, and I don't know. I was thrown by the fact that it meant the opposite of what I thought it was, because then you bring in the God figure, and I wonder if when he speaks of the stars, he's being metaphorical, and trying to relate back to the fact that God ordained for us to do this, just as he may have once ordained.
And then
Julius to be
Cassius,
king.
Cassius is like, nah, it's not God's will. It's that we haven't killed the bastard off.
A very humanistic perspective to deal with it yourself kind of
It
approach.
becomes, Cassius is that representation of a consistent desire to that the motive is to take down Caesar. Brutus's is a bit more complicated. He
Mhm.
contemplates whether or not it is the right decision.
I kind of take the quote as an answer to the question that some people battling certain diseases ask themselves, like, why me? Why did this happen to me? And by having it be the fault in our stars, he's saying, like, it's not your fault. You didn't do anything to deserve this, because some people do
You
it
weren't
that way.
singled out.
It's just happened. It was just.
And that if, with looking at it in the way that it was God's will, the idea that everything happens for a reason.
What really got to me, though, that I guess drew me into my first conclusion of thinking he had intended it to mean the fault was in themselves, and trying to be,
Like the cancerous body as defective.
as self, exactly, is when Hazel, toward the end, she's discussing Augustus's death, and she says, spoiler alert, she says the cancer, which was made of him, stopped his heart, which was made of him too. And I read that line, and that really kind of nailed it home for me. And then I watched that video, and I was like, you know what? Oh no, I'm gonna disagree with you here. And I was
Well, I
thinking,
think it can be viewed both
Yeah.
ways, and that's why it's such a great title for the book.
There's the idea of empowering the diseased too. It's like you could think I'm dying and that's fated, that's what's in the stars.
or you could take fate into your own hands.
Yeah. Just as she tries to in the end of the book, and towards the beginning she's like, nah, I'm dying, that's her narrative, and then enter Augustus and everything changes.
Granted, he is what happens.
He's the catalyst
She-
for
yeah.
her
She
transformation.
she puts a lot into him and allows him to control, or not really. Yeah.
She opens herself to
Yeah,
him in a way that
motion
she
the way
hasn't
that-
opened herself to the world because of her disease, and to see it happen and you see the little tiny pieces that fall into place. That she opens herself to her mother. She finally tells her mother why she feels the way she does. You see kind of this blossom happening from within her that was so closed off in the beginning, and to see all of that transpire in spite of what she has going on, kind of like you said, what could be taken as fated, it's going on, it's going to happen no matter what, or seeing her transform from that opinion to something that maybe can be changed, and if it can't be changed inevitably, at least it can be changed for now while she's here.
That's the appeal too. We can go back to question 2. The young adult appeal is the question of fate versus will. That's been classic. That's run through all it. That's gone from the Epic of Gilgamesh to the Odyssey to...
John Green is very, he leans on literature. He's a literature enthusiast himself, so of course you're going to see a lot of that reflect.
I think that's why
He writes.
there's so much literary appreciation built into the text, because I read an article about John Green as an author and his cookie cutter literature style, how there's like a smart kid in the novel, and then all this literature reference and blah blah blah, and how one targeted audience might think that makes it unrelatable, but then vice versa, like you said, he's tying in all these literature that he leans on, and he's making ideas that have been run through the course of time prevalent again to a generation that's not picking up those older books, and I think that that's really important as a starting point for them.
Because
to be
people
up here.
still need to know that. That's what Joseph Campbell was trying to tell everyone in Hero with a Thousand Faces or Power of Myth and all that. There's those archetypes that people don't realize they need, but they need. Joseph Campbell actually blames the decline of human civ, the decline of people being able to relate to one another on the fact that we've lost touch with myth.
But I think that's why, young adult lit is so important, because, you'll read Julius Caesar in class and you'll, fall asleep during it and you won't care, but you'll go and you'll
I
read
cared.
John Green because it's become popular,
cared.
and you'll notice that, you'll learn that the, title came from Julius Caesar, you'll go back and reread it, and you'll develop a love for Shakespeare, and you'll learn about those archetypes, and maybe it'll lead you to Joseph Campbell.
I actually wasn't as bored by Caesar, Caesar when I was in high school. So I'm part of the minority.
I'm talking about the common stereotype of the high school student doesn't want to read Shakespeare. We are the
It's funny.
minority in that situation.
One of my teacher friends at South is trying to get her kids to read Caesar. She teaches 10th grade general, and she's like, they are so bored. They don't know what is going on. And I said, so tired and to fault in our stars.
There was
You have to
some.
make it accessible. I think that's the main thing here across the board, is this novel and the way it blew up. It became very, very accessible on many levels. It's accessible to the cancer patient, it's accessible for the romantic, it's accessible for the parents of a cancer patient. I had someone who told me, I work at a summer camp in a youth group, one of the parents of a cancer survivor read the novel and said they immensely related to it, and they're, upwards of 50, so it's it's become a very accessible text, and the fact that so much is built into it to kind of springboard into other texts and other knowledge is really exciting for for me. I mean, I reread every poem that they've discussed after I got done with that book.
I do think that The Fault in Our Stars especially caters to the reader. It caters to the people of our generation, but it especially caters to the avid readers. Any final thoughts about The Fault in Our Stars?
Read it.
Yeah, read it. I mean, I heard a lot of diverse opinions about it, and I've read it a few times now, and every time I read it, I like it a little more. So I definitely think it's worth putting the time in, and I believe strongly in literature in general. Even if you don't like something, it helps you tailor your literary perspective to continue reading. So it's definitely a book that tackles a lot of issues that's worth reading and worth, seeing how it affects your reading experience as a whole.
It's a quick read too, so you might as
Yeah.
well. You'll never know if you ever read it.
I
so.
finished the last 150 pages in 3 hours.
Yeah.
I think Nicole probably has me beat up with the
I read it, the last time I read it was on my plane back home from London, which was a 5.5-hour flight, and I read the whole book again, so.
Didn't you read it in Paris as well?
I did, I read it in Paris under the Eiffel Tower, it was the best
Yeah,
moment of my
so-
life. Happiest I've ever been.
It's like
How many?
such
How
tragic
much did
romance.
you actually read it?
I've read it 4 times.
Or how under the Eiffel Tower?
I was there for like 2 hours.
Oh.
My mom went, got a croissant, came back, ate the croissant, left again, got a croquet monsieur, came back, ate the cheese sandwich.
It's weird that croissants are
Speaking of which,
Austrian.
And then maybe
talking about
leave.
The Fault in Our Stars gives me the urge to go grab some Howdah cheese and crackers, just like they did in the segment where when Augustus tells Hazel that they're going to Amsterdam.
They're bad cheese sandwiches.
Dutch cheese, which Howdah is one of the main. It is Gouda.
Alright,
Right.
we're getting off topic.
Other
Cheese
words?
talk is not literary.
It can be.
Literature, music, and cheese, the 3 desires
Forgot butter.
of life.
Butter.
Unless you're
Come on.
lactose intolerant.
Especially in
You
France.
think you're Julia Child or something?
Well, it's France's secret to cooking is butter, butter, and more butter. Everyone knows that by now. It's a cliche almost.
Julia Child is French
Yeah.
cooking.
Of
But
course.
If you're
That is
interested
funny.
in picking up The Fault in Our Stars, which I think you should be, it placed 4th in my top 5 from last year of all of the books that I read. Nicole's, it's number 1 of all time.
Number 2.
Number 2, okay.
Number 2. Number 1 is a guilty pleasure novel that I won't discuss on film.
Okay.
Number 2. Still a good one.
Somebody can remember. But The Fault in Our Stars, if you haven't read the book, this looks familiar. I highly suggest that you check it out.
You can find it at any store in America.
Right.
Basically.
That sells books.
And
it's
It's
like
just hard to
sell
come by.
However,
So
support indie bookstores and get it at Tattered Cover or Powell's or something.
Start with your the smaller outlets, and if need be, look
to Barnes and Noble.
Barnes
Or
and Noble
Target.
and
It's probably
Amazon.
cheaper at Target.
Yeah, Target's the way to be.
We're all about saving the dollars.
Yes.
And cents.
Already.
But sometimes it makes sense to not buy where you save cents because
Of reason.
If you're interested in our show, like, comment, subscribe. We would love to hear from you. If you have anything to say, we'd love to hear what you thought about the novel. Be sure to join us next time for another episode of Literary Gladiators. For now, keep reading.